Hello, I'm Jody Gale, Extension Agent with Utah State University Extension Service. I'd like to talk about how to make a windrow compost in this segment in working within the home yard. Composting is a very important technique that we use to be able to take organic waste, organic material, decompose it in a partial manner, and then be able to add that back to flower beds, gardening, and various areas that greatly benefit plant growth. Composting takes essentially four processes or products to be able to be successful. In this case, we have straw that's left over from covering carrots this last winter in this garden that were used to insulate carrots left in the ground for a period of time. Underneath this windrow are lawn clippings from last summer's lawn mowings, leftover vegetables and vines from the garden last fall, and a lot of other organic material. Things from the kitchen tables such as banana peelings, leftover food, orange rinds, all of those products are very rich in carbon and are very, very beneficial to soils. You know, it doesn't matter which kind of soil you have, whether it's a very sandy soil, a loamy soil, or even a clay soil. The addition of organic matter is the single best thing that can be done to promote good plant growth in the garden environment. So in this process, we're going to show how to handle a large amount of carbon or organic material. Homeowners are often aware of the small barrels that are used for very small quantities of composting. They work very, very well, but they are often very small in size. In larger gardening situations where there's a lot of material available, it takes a lot bigger way to be able to handle that. The principles of composting are basically these. You need to have an organic matter source, a lot of oxygen, a fertilizer source, especially nitrogen fertilizer, and moisture to be able to start the composting process. In addition to those, there needs to be a source of bacteria and funguses that are readily available in our soil and in our environment. That as those products are all mixed together, they start a composting process where the organic material begins to break down. Often the temperature inside a compost pile will rise rapidly, approaching 140 to 145 degrees, where many weed seeds are killed, many pathogens are killed, and in the composting process with what you have left are very beneficial to the garden. With this composting pile, we're also going to add some animal manures. We have a few chickens here, and so there's some animal manures and shavings from bedding for chickens that we're going to apply to spread this uniformly through the pile. Nitrogen fertilizer, in this case, the fertilizer we have is called urea. There are always three numbers on a fertilizer bag. The first number represents the percent nitrogen, the middle number the percent phosphorus, and the last number the percent potassium. In composting, you really don't need the potassium and the phosphorus, but a large amount of nitrogen fertilizer is needed. And in this case, you're not fertilizing the plants that will be growing in the compost in the future. You're simply fertilizing the funguses, the bacterias, and those microorganisms that are going to break the organic matter down into humus and humic acid. Applying a very generous amount of nitrogen fertilizer to the compost pile before you begin to mix it is a good way to do it. Just as a comparison, this is a gallon can. A gallon can will hold approximately 7 pounds of most fertilizers, irregardless of their percentage. I've put a pretty good quantity in here. You apply a very heavy, liberal amount through a very large amount of material. So we're going to be applying approximately 12 to 14 pounds of material through this compost pile. I'm going to add the additional of the poultry manure along with bedding, and spread that out across the top of the pile to be mixed in. Other livestock manures, such as manure from horses, from dairy cows, beef, are all very appropriate to add to a compost pile along with poultry manure. poultry in the form of chicken waste or turkey waste are very high in phosphorus and potassium and rich in nitrogen along with organic matter and add a great deal to the compost pile. Things that should not be applied to a compost pile are manures from animals that are carnivorous in nature, such as cats and dogs. That type of animal manure is not appropriate, and through carnivore manure, various types of pathogens and worms can be transmitted to humans. So those should be excluded from the compost pile. Additional things that should not be added are meat byproducts from the table, bones, maybe meat trimmings of various types. Those should be disposed of in a separate way and not added to a compost pile. The next step in preparing compost is to incorporate oxygen and thoroughly mix that along with mixing all of the organic-based materials that are together. For small compost pile, a standard pitchfork, shovels are good. Pitchforks work particularly well where you're dealing with materials that need to be turned over. In large quantities, if you have a small or a large garden tiller available, they become very effective and make a hard job quite easy. Composting, the more that it's turned, meaning the more often that it's mixed up with oxygen, the faster the composting process will go. Compost piles that are turned every 2 or 3 days will decompose very quickly. During warm weather time of year, during June, July, and August, many times compost can be completed in as soon as 6 to 9 weeks. During the shoulders of the year, during the spring season such as now, or in the fall season when the temperatures are cooler, especially when the nights get below freezing, the compost process is much slower, but still continues to move forward. So at the end of the season, it's a good idea to gather up all of your old vegetables and things and add those to the pile and mix them in the fall. And as the weather warms in the spring, add the additional nitrogen as we have done here and begin and ramp up the process by working it up with a pitchfork, incorporating the oxygen that the microorganisms rely upon inside the compost pile to do the decomposition. There's 2 terms that are important to remember here. Anaerobic is a condition where oxygen is not present. And deep inside the pile, when oxygen is gradually consumed, the decomposition process will stop. Only on the edges where you have a lot of oxygen, which is called aerobic, will the composting process continue. So in order to prevent an anaerobic condition in a compost pile, it requires a lot of turning by hand with a pitchfork, or in this case, as we're demonstrating how to compost by a windrow, we'll be using a garden tiller. In addition to the organic matter source that we've previously discussed and the addition of the nitrogen fertilizer, keeping the compost moist enough to promote a good, healthy environment for the microorganisms is important. Water is very essential and important to that process. This particular compost pile has a lot of lawn clippings, straw, and leaves along with the animal manures, and it's fairly dry, so we're going to add quite a bit of water to that. In the tilling process, we're working in soil that's on the edges and on the underneath side of the pile. That soil contains the microorganisms that will inoculate the pile and jumpstart the composting process. Irrigation and the addition of water is kind of dependent upon the environmental conditions. Initially, if it's very dry, then you add quite a bit of water. If the compost pile is within the boundaries of a sprinkling system, the additional sprinkling system irrigation water along with water in your garden is sometimes plenty to be able to keep it moist enough. It's just a matter of checking it, feeling the compost with your hands. If it's moist, there's plenty of water there. You don't want to have the compost soggy and mucky, but it needs to have a generous amount of water present. The more you till and incorporate oxygen into the compost pile, the more often you turn it, the faster the decomposition process will occur. Okay, there's the process of creating a compost pile in a windrow fashion using a common garden tiller. By way of review, the ingredients that are needed in a compost pile are a source of organic matter, in this case in the source of straw, lawn clippings from the previous season, squash and other residue from a garden situation, even flowers and things from a flower bed, all incorporated together using available animal manures. Animal manures that are acceptable are from poultry, beef, horse, etc. Manures that should not be used are from carnivores such as cats and dogs. Material that should not be added to the compost pile are in the form of meat and bones, but other organic materials that are plant-based are the right things to start with. The additional needs are nitrogen fertilizer, very heavy application. In this case, the fertilizer is to feed the microorganisms, not necessarily plants that the compost will be used to nourish in the future. Oxygen mixed into the soil, which is easily done with a tiller or with a common pitchfork by turning and manipulating the pile, and then inoculating the pile with the microorganisms themselves, which are present in soil that's underneath and around the compost pile and that are very readily available in our environment. Microorganism product would not need to be purchased or applied. They're readily available with the soils that are present.